Can you imagine a US president who called the Bible a fable and thought the story of Jesus was a myth? It sounds like something from a modern political headline, but this was a reality over 200 years ago. Today, we are diving into the surprising and largely untold story of John Adams, America's second president, and his incredibly complex, controversial, and deeply private religious beliefs. Get ready, because the man on the dollar bill was far from the simple Christian figure many assume him to be. Before we get into Adams, let's set the stage. The American founding fathers are often painted with a single brushstroke as devout, God-fearing Christians. We hear quotes about God and country, and it's easy to assume they all shared the same orthodox faith. But the reality is much more complicated. The late 18th century was a hotbed of intellectual revolution, the Age of Enlightenment. Thinkers were questioning everything, from the divine right of kings to the very nature of God himself. And many of the men who founded America were right in the middle of this intellectual storm. Figures like Thomas Jefferson were famously deists. They believed in a creator God, a sort of divine watchmaker who set the universe in motion and then stepped back to let it run on its own. They rejected miracles, divine intervention, and the divinity of Jesus. Benjamin Franklin held similar, somewhat fluid views. But John Adams? His journey was even more fascinating. Born into a strict Puritan family in Massachusetts, Adams was originally destined for the clergy. His early life was steeped in traditional Calvinist doctrine, predestination, original sin, and the absolute sovereignty of God. But as a young man studying at Harvard, his brilliant and inquisitive mind started to push back against the rigid dogma he was taught. He began to question the very foundations of the faith he was supposed to preach. He couldn't reconcile the idea of a loving God with the concept of eternal damnation for the vast majority of humanity. In his own words, written in his diary, he wrestled with these ideas. He found the core tenets of Calvinism dreadful and absurd. This was a huge personal crisis. To reject the path of a minister was a major decision, not just professionally but socially. He chose law instead, a field where he could use his intellect and reason to argue based on evidence, not faith. This was the first major step in his long and complicated spiritual evolution. So, if Adams wasn't a traditional Puritan, what did he believe? As he matured, his views solidified into a form of Unitarianism. This was a radical idea at the time. Unitarians, as the name suggests, believed in the unity of God. They rejected the Trinity, the concept of God as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. For them, Jesus was a great moral teacher, a remarkable human being, but not divine. He was not God. This was a direct challenge to the bedrock of mainstream Christianity. To deny the divinity of Christ was, for many, the ultimate heresy. And Adams wasn't shy about it, at least not in his private letters. He had a long and incredibly rich correspondence with his friend and political rival, Thomas Jefferson, especially in their later years. It's in these letters that we get the clearest, most unfiltered look into Adams's mind. He once wrote to Jefferson, "The fable of the virgin birth, of God becoming a man, has been the source of almost all the corruptions of Christianity." He saw these doctrines not as divine truths, but as human inventions, ideas grafted onto the simple moral teachings of Jesus by priests and politicians to gain power and control over the masses. He believed that over the centuries, Christianity had been twisted and corrupted, buried under layers of what he called superstition and pious fraud. Think about that for a moment. A founding father, a US president, calling the core stories of the New Testament fables and corruptions. He went even further. He spent years studying world religions, from ancient Greek and Roman mythology to Hinduism and Islam. He was looking for a universal, rational truth. He concluded that most organized religions, including Christianity, were filled with what he called miracles, mysteries, and authority designed to bypass human reason. In one of his most shocking letters, he told Jefferson, this would be the best of all possible worlds if there were no religion in it. Now, that quote is often taken out of context. He wasn't a modern-style atheist who believed there was no God at all. He clarified that he was talking about institutionalized, dogmatic religion, which he saw as a source of conflict, persecution, and ignorance throughout human history. He still believed in a creator, a divine providence, a God of nature that could be understood through reason and the observation of the universe. But the God of the Bible? The God of organized churches? That, he believed, was a lie, a human construct. So why isn't this more widely known? Why is John Adams often remembered as a standard Christian founder? There are a few reasons. First, These were incredibly dangerous ideas to express publicly. In the 18th and 19th centuries, being labeled an infidel or an atheist was political suicide. Adams was a savvy politician. While he was brutally honest in his private letters to trusted friends like Jefferson, he was much more cautious in his public statements. He understood the importance of religion for social order and morality for the general population. He would attend church services and use conventional religious language in his public speeches, even if his private interpretation of that language was radically different from his audience's. Second, history is often simplified. It's easier to create a neat, tidy narrative of pious founders than to grapple with the messy, complex, and often contradictory beliefs they actually held. The image of the founding fathers on their knees in prayer is powerful and comforting, but it erases the vibrant, contentious, and highly intellectual debates they were having about the nature of God, reason, and liberty. And finally, Adams's own writings are dense and voluminous. It is only by digging through thousands of pages of his diaries and letters that this full picture emerges. It's a picture of a man who never stopped questioning, never stopped learning, and was never afraid to follow his reason wherever it led him, even if it took him to conclusions that would have horrified his Puritan ancestors and shocked many of his contemporaries. John Adams' spiritual journey is a powerful reminder that history is never as simple as it seems. He was a man of deep, though unconventional, faith. A faith in reason, in moral virtue, and in a distant, rational creator. He rejected the Bible as literal truth and viewed the story of Christ's divinity as a man-made myth. He was a product of the Enlightenment, a skeptic, a rationalist, and one of the most intellectually daring presidents in American history. His story challenges us to look beyond the myths we've been told and to see the founders not as marble statues, but as the complex, brilliant, and deeply human figures they truly were. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into a hidden corner of American history. If you found this as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that challenge the conventional narrative. Let me know in the comments what you think about John Adams's beliefs. Until next time, keep questioning.